Well, here are the Edmonton Oilers' notable offseason transactions thus far. It's been a pretty quiet offseason for the most part. The biggest signing, of course, Conor Brown. They dealt Kyler Yamamoto and Klim Kostin to Detroit for futures and lost Nick Bjugstad. That's a tough loss for the Oilers. He leaves in free agency to go back to Arizona as we welcome in our Edmonton Bureau Chief, Ryan Rishaug. We love chatting with Ryan. We're going to talk about the D in a second, Ryan. We will get to the D, but let's talk about the fact that the Oilers signed Conor Brown, Connor McDavid's old Erie Otters buddy. The last time we talked to you, we talked about the potential of maybe using Warren Foegele as a trade chip. That hasn't happened. So do you see the forward group as it stands, Ryan? Do you see that set as we head to next season?
Yeah, I have a feeling, Jay, as we talk about the Oilers in this hit here tonight, I'm going to be like Debbie Downer for Oiler fans, like wah, wah guy, because people want to see movement. They want to see things happen. But I've been saying it for a couple of months now. I just don't see a tremendous amount of movement and big moves and that sort of thing. So to your point about the forward group, I think they'd like to beef themselves up a little bit in their bottom six. I think they could use some size, maybe a little robust style in that bottom six. So maybe there's room for another addition there. But for the most part, it's pretty set. And to your point on Warren Foegele, it was Kyler Yamamoto or Warren Foegele, one of those two. There was going to have to be some movement on just based on the cap. Ends up being Kyler Yamamoto, moved along with Klim Kostin to Detroit. That salary cleared off. I think they like Warren Foegele. And I think they think Foegele is going to play a big part on likely their third line this upcoming season. So I do think there's a pathway to keeping him on board and letting him do his thing. Ryan,
our close personal mutual friend Jason Gregor sent out a pretty interesting tweet the other day. He pointed out that Keandre Miller of the Rangers and Bowen Byram of the Colorado Avalanche both signed recently pretty similar deals. 2 years, around $3.85 million AAV. And it seems to me that if Evan Bouchard is going to be bridged by Ken Holland, that would be a pretty nice framework for a Bouchard deal. Would you agree?
Yeah, and he will be bridged by Ken Holland. There is no pathway to a long-term deal between Evan Bouchard and the Oilers at this point. It just doesn't make sense for either side or the cap. But yeah, I mean, if you think about young up-and-coming defensemen in the league and the next batch, those three players are definitely in there. Similar numbers, a lot of comps. I think that makes sense. And so, yeah, I think that does a little bit to set the market. A couple things to keep in mind on Evan Bouchard. He really came on through the last half of last season. After the trade deadline, one of the most productive, he was top 6 in the league in terms of production from the blue line after that trade deadline. And then in the playoffs, Jay, led the playoffs in scoring by defensemen in points. 17 points in the 12 playoff games. Led all D-men, only played 12 games. So real nice, strong production from Evan Bouchard towards the tail end. And I think carrying that into the negotiation helps as well. It wouldn't stun me if Bouchard came in a little bit ahead of where those guys landed. I think the Oilers would love for it to be sub-4. We'll see. My guess is it's probably right in and around that 4 range.
And then we always talk about the potential of an Evan Bouchard offer sheet, and we asked our other close personal mutual friend, Craig Button, about that the other day. And he made a good point. He said he doesn't think it's going to happen just because it hardly ever does happen. Are the Oilers even remotely worried about this possibility, Ryan?
Yeah, I didn't pay attention to Craig's answer because I was just staring at that hat the whole time. By the way, not everybody in Alberta does that during Stampede, just the people down south in Calgary. In Edmonton, we don't do the cowboy hats for Stampede. So sorry, I know you were hoping I'd be in one tonight, Jay.
I really was.
As for the offer sheet, yeah, I know. I'm sure you were. As for the offer sheet, I think that they're probably aware of it. I mean, he is ripe in some ways, and that the Oilers would have a heck of a tough time matching any sort of big dollar long-term deal. But I think you have to consider it from Bouchard's camp too, right? What are his point totals going to look like on a bridge deal here in Edmonton? What are his next 2 seasons of production going to look like? And where else is he going to go where he can push those sorts of numbers? So Evan Bouchard sets up to cash in here. It's just about being a little bit patient. And in a couple of seasons after running that power play, who knows where those dollars will be. So are they aware of it? Yes. Are they worried about it? Maybe a little bit. But to Craig's point the other night, it seldom happens, seldom works. And so it's kind of one of those things that's often talked about, not very often executed.
I will say, though, the idea of two GMs fighting in a barn is still really exciting to me.
Yeah, that was classic. Unreal. Well, who are the two tech guys that are going to go at it? Elon,
Zuckerberg and Elon.
From Facebook.
Yeah.
Would have been the Canadian version of that.
Brian Burke and Kevin Lowe in a barn. Oilers $5.6 million under the cap. Ryan, is all that going to Bouchard and Ryan McLeod, who's filed for salary arbitration, or might there be a little to sprinkle elsewhere?
Well, I mean, if Bouchard's going to be in the 4 range and McLeod, who's filed for arbitration, I know they're probably coming in over 2. I'm sure the Oilers would like to be more in the mid ones, 1.5, somewhere in that range. So even if they land at 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, 1 whatever, and you add that to Bouchard's 4, I'm no math genius, but I think that gobbles up most of the number you just talked about. So yeah, they're going to be tight. They've even spent next year's cap with Conor Brown's bonuses. This is the thing, Jay, and I alluded to this at the beginning about not a ton of activity. It's like the Oilers believe they're close, and they believe that tweaking is necessary to get them over the hump. They're looking for that extra 5-10%, right?
Yeah.
Your show is fantastic, Jay, but could it be better, 5 or 10%? Sure.
Probably.
Does that take a complete pile of big moves to do it? No, right? It's tweaking, and that's why the moves this year are going to be more chill, more subtle, which Oilers fans will love, but they're only looking for that 5-10%, like your show, to put them into that elite category.
I tend to agree with you on that one, though. There are some people on the crew I'd like to see removed, but that's for another show. Okay. A few weeks ago, you said to us, and you just alluded to it, there's really no move to make a big move, no room to make a big move for a big-name defenseman. We talked about Karlsson, Brett Pesce, Noah Hannafin. There's guys out there still, though, that maybe could help this team. I know you feel you'd like a little more on D. I know that. Is there any way, any potential way that happens?
Well, look, if you want to get creative about it, and maybe they're exploring some of these options, but you kind of get into that hockey pool trade scenario, right? Where it's like, a few guys just messing around, come up with some good ideas. But I mean, they happen sometimes. So let's put on the optimism hat and say, okay, let's say there is something to get done. What does it look like? Well, probably got to move Brett Kulak or Cody Ceci on the back end, right? They need to move out $3+ million.
Yep.
Maybe you then decide that you are going to move Warren Fogle, so you make a move like that, and then you'd have to do even a little bit more tweaking, and then you would have space to potentially add something. But now you've moved out 2 or 3 pieces on a team that was close last year. I think we all agree they gave Vegas as good a run as anyone. So now you're subtracting a lot and messing with a bunch of stuff. Jay, I think I said this on your show the last time I was there. There is a move that's required here, but it's like a very targeted move.
Yeah.
And that very targeted, specific move cannot be made until trade deadline, in my eyes. It's hard to know right now. You're throwing at the dartboard from a lot further back. So I think we will see that targeted move closer to the trade deadline.
Before I let you go, what are your thoughts on the Conor Brown addition? We know about the injury history.
Yeah.
But in so many ways, do you see him as a top 6, Ryan, or do you see him more comfortably fitting as sort of like a top 9 hybrid?
Yeah, he'll be a top 6 player here. Like if he comes back and regains some of the form that he had before, a tough injury, right, to come back from.
Yeah.
But all indications the team got was that his rehab was going well and that he was fully up to speed. And they expect him to come in and be okay. He's a top 6 forward all day long on this team. No question about it. And that's with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins also in the top 6. The player that would have probably fallen into that spot had they not got Conor Brown likely would have been Dylan Holloway, still a very young, unproven player at this level. So no question. It's just a matter of whether he plays on McDavid's wing or on Draisaitl's wing. Why wouldn't you throw him with Connor McDavid and see what kind of synergy there is there? But just think about the top 6, right? Nugent-Hopkins, McDavid, Conor Brown on the right side. That lets you go Evander Kane on the left, Leon Draisaitl in the middle, and Zach Hyman over on the right wing. That's the Oilers' top 6, unless either Conor Brown isn't ready to step back in at that level, or Dylan Holloway comes in and blows the doors off. Those are the 2 fighting for that spot.
Man, you always give us such great info. By the way, the next date on the Oilers off-season calendar, the salary arbitration hearing for Ryan McLeod, August the 4th, unless the two sides can come to an agreement before then. But here's what we all agree on. That 5-10% that we needed for this show, this guy right here, he delivered that today. Right here, Ryan Rishaug.
Oh, come on now.
Yes,
come on now. I'll believe you when I'm sitting in those chairs and not just in this TV. When I qualify to come and be sitting in that chair with you, then I'll believe you.
Okay, we'll see if WestJet has any deals on flights.
Sounds good.